Bayern Munich has suspended Sadio Mane after his dressing room altercation with Leroy Sane, but the two are back at training on Thursday. Mane will not be available, though, to face Hoffenheim on Saturday in the Bundesliga, as he's been suspended, and he'll also receive a fine. We're going to continue the chat with Mario Melchiot. Gab Marcotti is joining us as well here. Gab, I want to get the latest on the situation, because there had been talks and rumours that it could go so far as to seeing Sadio Mane getting his contract terminated. What have you heard?
Yeah, I thought that was always going to be extremely unlikely. I mean, in theory, you could do that, but you have to look at it from Bayern's perspective. And, you know, here you'd be writing off an asset that you just spent a lot of money on last summer, and he would need to be replaced. So clearly, it's much better to, first of all, ascertain the facts and you know, try to persuade these two guys that, hey, you're on the same team, work out your differences for the good of the team, and act like professionals. But in terms of the latest, there are reports emanating from Senegal as well, suggesting that that there may have been a racist slur directed at Sadio Mane from Leroy Sane. Obviously, this is unconfirmed for now. These is just what's being reported. And, you know, if this story continues to get out there, I think it's something Bayern will need to address, either to confirm it or to deny that it happened.
Yeah, because obviously that information, as Gab says, is out there. Stevie, seemingly, though, it's a one-game suspension and a fine. Are you OK with that?
Yeah. You can't physically attack your own players. You can't do it. I've had it myself as a coach. I suspended Clint for 2 weeks. Him and Joey had an altercation that could have been way more serious than it turned out. And so you can't have it. It's interesting the reason behind it, though, because if it's what Gab says, this completely changes everything. You know, it's one thing to fall out with your teammate. It's another thing to have fisticuffs. But then when we're talking about racism, it's a completely different matter. And if it turns out to be true, then somebody, in my opinion, somebody has to go. Somebody's going to have to leave the building, which is completely different than two players falling out and having fisticuffs. Totally different.
Listen, I think we've all seen in our time players fighting at different clubs that we've been in, and that being the only issue, then you think Bayern Munich have handled this right, and you support what they've done. But now with this reporting, and if any aspect of it is true, it surprises me that Bayern Munich doesn't say that investigations are continuing, or they're looking further into it before they pass this judgment down. Maybe they are still looking into the allegations. But I think while it's black players speaking to a black player and using a racist term or racist slur, however you want to interpret that, there's an aspect of colorism to this that I think the club needs to look very deeply at. You have to ask, I think the context to it is the relationship between Leroy Sane and Sadio Mane before this. And that needs to be investigated. That needs to be a part of how this is adjudicated. Again, I can't speak to that. That is something that the club will have to kind of ascertain in their own investigations, because if this holds up, and if this is, as it says on the tin, for want of a better expression, then Leroy Sane can find himself in a lot more trouble than Sadio Mane is in right now.
It certainly does add extra context, Mario, doesn't it, to the whole situation, if these reports do prove to be true?
Yeah, no, definitely. You know what the guys already said. Like, if this is true, and saying, like Gab said, you know, if it's a racial thing, look, we all know how we all think about this situation. That's not something that we want to support. But also on the other part, guys, this is football. In football, in dressing rooms, there's a lot of things that happen. For me already, the interesting part is that the news came out of the dressing room. So, okay, if someone saw it, okay, it's a different issue. The other thing is that either you sometimes have to address your things inside, and then it comes out, and those two players clearly have, like, if they have a history or if they had some allegation that they were, you know, like, disagreements always happen in football. And things like that, battles and situations, we have seen a number of, even the guys that sit there, they know, we all have seen some dispute or whatever it's been at. But at the end of the day, you just hope, can we fix this really quickly? Because at the end of the day, we have one goal, and they both have one goal. And as long as that doesn't affect the goal, and they can patch things up really quickly, we can move on. If that's not the case, like Stevie said, something needs to be happened, but they better hurry up because you don't want this to linger on.
Based on what we do know, Shaka, what would be the correct punishment?
Again, it really comes down to the context and the relationship between Mane and Sane. And that, ultimately, I think, has to be the foundation of what is to come. If they don't have the best of relationships even before this, let's just, we're thinking worst case scenario, and it is true what's being reported that Leroy Sane said, then again, I always advocate for not just a suspension, but also an educative aspect to this. If Leroy Sane does say the things that he did to Sadio Mane in a highly emotive circumstance, given the result of the game, and again, just thinking worst case scenario in terms of these two relationships, Sane has to be looking at 4-game suspension, 4 or 5 games from, this is all internal, and then there has to be some kind of an education around this, understanding the context or lack of it in terms of the phrases that he used, the moment that he used it in, the player that he was speaking to. And I think these ultimately are things that the entire dressing room can benefit from. These these educative aspects are things that the entire dressing room can benefit from. Because the last thing you need in that highly charged, very emotional atmosphere is somebody using highly charged, very emotional language, because that will explode.
Let's hope it's nothing to do with racism, and it's just two guys that don't get on and are falling out. It then becomes a decision for the coach and the boardroom. Do we let this affect the rest of the team? Because when two players don't get on as badly as a couple of players I've seen not get on, it completely and utterly affects everybody. Because then you turn up for training, you have to start making sure the two of them are not playing on opposite sides of the field, because then they're going to start during the game. But then you've also got to make sure that if they are on the same side, it's not affecting them because they'll start bickering with each other as well. So this is not, this is actually a very serious thing. It's funny for us because we've seen a lot of times people arguing, pushing, shoving, throwing punches, the whole thing. And if they're men about it and it's not too bad, then by next week it's forgotten. But if it's the race, or it's two people who just can't get on, then one of them has to go. Because if they don't, the whole thing affects everybody, including every single day at training.
Mario?
No, what Shaka just said, I like that point what he said also about education. That's something that I have to be honest, we were part of a long journey. And some of the education sometimes, people always talk about all the other things, all the aspects that, trophies, money, this, that. But education sometimes is what we really need. If someone just explaining to us what we need to do in certain occasions and explain to us what is expected from you. Because regardless of whatever happens here, sometimes you just have to say, look, guys, if you have a disagreement, take a moment and, clear it up and leave it. Because there were moments when I came to England, the allegations sometimes were like, okay, guys, if it really has to be that big, we might have to, find something else or find a solution, or you, we already mentioned it, saying, you might have to stay home and we figure it out. And when we know exactly what to do, we will call you back. You don't want things like that. They need both players, so that's why that will take too long. No, education is what I agree with.
Gab?
All right, just 2 points here. One is this story comes from Senegalese media, and again, we're in the realm of speculation. If the story's true, if the story's not true, I don't expect this is somebody in the Bayern dressing room, like say Leon Goretzka, is going to have many contacts in Senegalese media. So you assume that if the allegation's there and it's accurate, it comes from Mane's camp, somebody close to him. And I think that's something to be taken into account, because there's also another piece which is, if something like this happens, we deal with it via the club, first and foremost. So I think there's an element there. And there's another element here. They have a sporting director there, Brazzo Salihamidzic, who is an ex-player, who is Bayern through and through, who is extremely fiery and outspoken to begin with, who likes being hands-on in the dressing room. I think this is something that, he's waiting in there to effectively sort out. But I think what you're seeing is, some of the issues at this club, it's not like magically you send Nagelsmann away and they're all fixed.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN Plus.